Hi everybody, Phil Seymour here. I'm joined today by Dan Taylor, my colleague, who's the airline specialist at IBA, and this is the latest in our Aviation Conversation series, and we're going to be talking about airline performance in 2023 thus far. So Dan, it's been a horrendous 3 years for aviation. We are out of COVID now, even Far East China have come out of recession, no more limitations on testing, that kind of thing. So the aviation industry is ready to go. How are the vital statistics looking? Things like capacity and all of that. How's it looking so far?
Hi Phil, yes, it's an absolutely fascinating time for aviation. This year so far, as we heard from the news, there's been some really good performance been announced. So looking at capacity first, globally we're already up to around 98% of ASKs, and that's continuing to grow. We're seeing that increasing through this quarter. So it's been a mixed year really. There's been some headwinds and some tailwinds really.
Of course, that 98% is an average. There are some which are above the 2019 levels, but some still below. So can you just give some context about some of the regions which are better than others, or some that have still got some way to go?
Absolutely, yes. So yeah, North America and Europe already exceeding or close to 2019 levels. Asia Pacific, with sort of the later release of lockdowns in China, they're a little bit lagging behind on getting back to 2019 levels. Interestingly, LATAM, that's quite far ahead of where it was in 2019.
Oh, okay. That's positive, at least for that region. So how is that capacity? Capacity is one thing. It's all right putting the seats out there. But how's it going in terms of profitability? Is the airlines making profits yet?
Yes.
Good.
Yes, they are.
Okay, excellent.
In the short answer, yeah. But there is variation across the regions, of course. First out of lockdown in Europe and North America, seeing those early good results coming in already. Of course, with Asia Pacific, with the later release of lockdown, those results are coming, but are lagging behind. So we're starting to see those improvements coming through now.
We have seen a lot in the press though over the last few months in terms of issues that have affected airline punctuality. So there are still some big challenges that are outside the control of an airline CEO on board. So can you just explain what's happened there in terms of some of the issues that have affected punctuality?
Absolutely. There's been all sorts of headaches for airlines this summer. In Europe, we've had industrial disputes and strikes, cancelling and delaying lots of flights. We've seen airport staff, airline staff, ATC staff, all with industrial actions causing many headaches for a lot of travellers this summer. In North America, we've seen really bad weather. In the northeast US, we've seen a lot of cancellations of flights due to the thunderstorms and, of course, the impact of those large fires we saw and the smoke closing parts of the airspace.
Yeah, there's definitely been some extremes, and I just putting some of that into context. I mean, here in the UK, we're complaining about the wet July and how August wasn't really a great summer. I think from what I understand from some of the travel agencies that actually caused a big demand. People wanted to get away, but meanwhile, a lot of the rest of Europe, Southern Europe, Mediterranean, were actually probably too hot. They were suffering, and actually at some points, I think we had issues with tours being cancelled in Greece, some of the Greek islands, and holidays to Tenerife were actually cancelled during August. So I think still big pressures on the airlines. And obviously recently we had the issue in the UK with the air traffic system failure, which we were told was a couple of false bits of information that seemed to crash the whole system. But at least that didn't result in any disasters. We may have seen delays for people getting back from vacation and people going. But at least the system failed safe. It didn't cause a disastrous air traffic collision. But perhaps I'm looking there to say sometimes the system has to break in a safe way. So at least we're relieved that it happened in that context. Anyway, shall we move on to more issues that have also affected airlines? Have been the OEMs. The OEMs are still not manufacturing new aircraft as rapidly as expected. Some of the information we're looking at is obviously even pre-COVID, Boeing were having problems because the MAX was grounded in 2019. But if we look at 2018 deliveries from Boeing, they were just below 600 aircraft a year. Airbus were producing just over 600 aircraft per year. But there are still some issues around that supply chain. I don't think all of these things are down to Airbus and Boeing just not able to produce aircraft themselves. They do rely on thousands of other vendors. But do you see that getting back to a more normal level in the next couple of years?
Yeah, absolutely. And as you say, those supply chain headaches, Boeing and Airbus have been busy working through, rebuilding some of that disrupted supply chains. There's been a lot of disruption in material flow lower down in the supply chain, which has really, slowed things down. So that they're improving those flows. So I think we will see improvements in those production rates, and they're likely to come back up to where they were in 2018. Probably in 2025, I would say, back up to those sorts of levels.
Yeah, we might touch on how that's impacted some aircraft values and lease rates as well later in the conversation. But there is also the knock-on effect of the MRO industry. We're seeing issues with slow supply of materials, labour, manpower, resource is also a problem for some of the MROs now. It's not one of those businesses where you can work from home. If you've got to fix aircraft, you've got to be on the aircraft. So whereas lots of other industries are getting used to, perhaps people not being in the office 5 days a week. If you're an MRO, you need people in the hangars. But I think there's been a migration of people, technicians actually looking at their lifestyle, thinking, do they really want to be fixing aeroplanes, or can they work in other areas in the supply chain? So we know that the MRO industry is under pressure. Dan, I want to touch on the cost headwinds again, because I think there are some considerable issues that airlines have had to consider. Can you give us a bit of the detail around what those issues are and could be?
Absolutely. There's a number of cost headwinds at the moment. We've already talked about employment costs. We've seen industrial actions, and some of those have been resolved by increasing wages. So that's a huge part of an airline's costs. We talked about supply chain restricting the production rates of new aircraft and for maintaining existing aircraft. That's obviously putting pressures on price of parts and price of leasing aircraft and purchasing new aircraft. So that's another driver increasing. Interest rates remain high, so that's obviously putting pressure on the financials. Fuel is remaining high as well. So all these add up, and it's high costs are remaining at the moment. On a unit basis, though, when you divide those costs by the number of ASKs, as we say, the available seat kilometres, it's actually has come down slightly.
Right.
And I think what we're seeing is airlines are increasing the capacities back up to, as we mentioned earlier, back up to 2019 levels, and they're utilising their aircraft a lot more to do this. So they're getting higher efficiencies from their aircraft, which means their actual unit costs or cost per ASKs are steadying or even declining in some areas, which is a positive thing, really.
Yeah, it's funny, when I read some of the analyst reports on airlines, I think we've seen American Airlines doing a deal with their pilots union, which was seen as positive news because it means aircraft will still fly, there won't be industrial action. I think some analysts were reporting that as being negative for the airline, because obviously it's put the cost base up, and therefore the reforecasting of profitability has actually come down. But ultimately, I think it is part of that adjustment. Do you think airlines have been, say, almost getting away with it because they've been able to increase ticket prices? I think it is as simple as that at the moment, is it?
Yeah, that pent up demand that we saw post COVID. I know we keep talking about it, and we're going to continue for a little while longer. I think yes, airlines have been able to increase their fares to cover all these high costs at the moment, and the demand is there. You know, they're selling the tickets. Load factors remain, you know, where they should be. So, and looking at forward bookings as well through winter in the Northern Hemisphere, they continue to remain pretty strong. So I suppose the question is that going to continue into next year? I think we all want to know, those high fares, is that going to continue?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we've seen when we were talking earlier in the year about the outlook for 2023, we were saying that actually, despite higher interest rates, despite higher energy costs, employment figures were still looking positive. Earlier this year, both Europe and the USA were saying there's still more jobs available than ever. The unemployment figures were as low as they've been for many years. But that is starting to change now. I think both UK and US, in terms of those macro numbers, there is some pressure now. So I think that is one of the risk factors going as we go out of 2023 into 2024, is just that cautionary aspect of, could there be some cutting back in terms of travel? But I think from what we're seeing, even here at IBA, the business travel still seems to be very positive. I think a couple of years ago we were saying, we never need to go to any more conferences. Everything's going to be done by Zoom and team calls. But actually, I think whilst businesses can maintain their businesses and their customer-client relationships through those sorts of calls, in order to grow a business and to win new customers, we still are social animals, and we like to see people face to face and interact. So I think the business travel figures, are they looking reasonable, do you know, or is it basically aircraft are being filled up with economy passengers?
Business travel isn't growing as fast as leisure, as we know, but it is still there. We're seeing a slight increase from last year, about 1%. What we're seeing is an increase of the new type of traveller, which is the business with leisure trip. So what we're finding is a lot of these business trips, people tag on a leisure element to it. So they might arrange their meeting on a Friday, so then they stay that little bit longer and create a leisure trip as well. So we're seeing more of those, which is very positive.
I think that's great advice. Thanks very much. I'll bear that in mind as we plan to go to conferences around the world then. Thanks for that tip. In terms of our outlook, from what I've seen, we're forecasting a return to profitability for most regions over the next 3 years. Is that right? Are there any areas of concern?
Yes, we're seeing absolutely an improvement in profitability for airlines across all regions, really. We talked about some of those headwinds, and you mentioned the pressures on disposable spending next year as the economics and the squeeze people are feeling through next year, and will those high fares still be able to keep those high load factors? We'll see that. Historically, airlines, when profitability's been good, they increase their capacities. And they increase their capacities beyond what the market can take, and we see fares come down, and we see profitability come down, and we see airline failures. So if airlines can be disciplined with their capacities next year, then I think we will see these profitability remain at good levels.
Yeah, I mean, I've been pleasantly surprised by the relatively bad press that was out there surrounding the A380. We actually did do a recording earlier this year, I think, about the A380 specifically, and I think the recent news, I think that Lufthansa said that a few years ago that they were unlikely to be operating the A380 again. Then they said, well, we'll be getting 6 of them back into service. And then more recently, they've said we're going to have 8 A380s back into service. So I suppose that's a practical example, isn't it, of that increase in capacity. And obviously, there's nothing bigger than an A380 to do so. So I think that's fair. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
The other thing on storage levels generally, I think we're seeing a reasonable decline in storage levels. Aircraft are coming back to service.
They are coming back. They have been returning to service. They're not down to the storage levels that we had before COVID. Storage levels are still slightly elevated. Perhaps with some of those aircraft, some of the older types, perhaps it's still not economical to bring them back online.
Yeah.
And of course, some of the environmental considerations of those older aircraft that also might be playing into some of the decisions to bring these back online.
Yeah, I think we've seen, obviously, one of the positive aspects, if I can refer to it in that context, of the COVID issues was the freighter market was really quite strong in terms of moving supplies, PPE around the world. And we did see a number of aircraft, freighter aircraft, older 767s, 757s, their utilisation did increase. I think just to put this in context, our figures for 2018 storage levels, there were around about 10% of the commercial airline fleet was in storage, but that is now, there's still about 20% of the commercial fleet in storage, but actually, obviously, at the peak, we were way up because of aircraft not being able to fly, so they were long-term parked. And of course, we have seen a surge in the freighter conversions. Some of the older 737-800s and A320s, those narrow-body aircraft, a huge demand for freighter conversions. We have actually put some information out more recently on where we think that's going, and is the bubble going to burst in terms of freighter conversions? But I'll leave the audience to find that information on our website. Startup airlines, what are they doing in terms of, are they just filling old routes or developing new routes? Is there a one single answer to that, or is it a combination?
We're seeing all sorts of new airlines starting up. Charter, ACMI, regionals. Interestingly, Europe is seeing the most startup airlines this year. And the level of startups is about the same as what we used to see before COVID. So we are seeing these new airlines popping up now.
Yeah, I think a lot of the work we're doing here at IBA, the inquiries we're getting in terms of assisting airlines with developing the business plans, looking at the competition, aircraft fleet selection. I think that demand has been stronger than ever. And that's why we are heading down the route of producing IBA airline reports, but more of that later. I was talking to somebody recently, Dan, about the startup airlines. Can there ever be too many startup airlines? And in Europe, it must be positive, mustn't it? But what are the downsides of having too many airlines?
Well, I think it's great for the consumer, for someone who wants to travel. It's going to put competition out there. It's going to put new fares and new products and new ideas. So I think it's always great for the consumer.
Yeah, and great for us, of course, because those airlines need help. But where does this then fit in? This is a nice sort of segue into the whole ESG issue. Emissions. Every time we open up the news generally, and aviation news, there's comments around the latest SAF, the latest innovations, hydrogen options in the future for the larger aircraft. Obviously, it's a very big part of what we do here at IBA. But I think it's one of the issues we're finding is the accusations that whenever there's a move made by an airline, that it's seen as greenwashing. Are there ways that airlines can, manage this better there?
Absolutely. Yeah, there's a number of things I think airlines can do and are doing, I understand. I think one of the big ones we see a lot in the press is sort of transparency around their carbon offsetting schemes. We've seen a lot of these new schemes coming up. You know, when you're buying tickets, you have options to you know, put money onto some of these. You know, recently Ryanair was forced to drop a couple of these schemes. You know, a reforestation project in Ireland was one of them, and a whale and dolphin counting scheme. And they were both found to be ineffective at doing what they're supposed to do, which is reducing carbon. EasyJet also announced, you know, they had to withdraw one of their schemes also. So yeah, absolutely, transparency is key here. You know, the public are becoming more informed on these subjects. So I think airlines really need to listen to what's happening in the latest science. They also, you know, what they can do is use third-party certifications. So get those independent certifications to show, you know, this is sort of genuine schemes. They should rely on data to describe their environmental gains. Really.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I should just mention again that here at IBA we do conform to the International Capital Markets Association code on verification. So if anybody does need any help with second party opinion or verification, we are involved in that process. Well, look, I think I'll wrap it up there, Dan. There's plenty to talk about. In terms of IBA and what we're doing in the airline space, we will be shortly announcing very exciting news in terms of our airline analysis product. So more about that in the future. If you need any more information about anything we've discussed here and you have airline related questions, then please do contact Dan and the team. We're ready and waiting. So thanks for your attention. See you all soon. Bye for now.